Refuah Shlema for your sister.
And Kol Yisrael.
Okay, so Amen. So we're on page Tes in Likutei Torah. We're actually Torah Or. And if you go, you see where the on the left column where the black dot is, my friends. So go to the black dot and then go directly to the right. From there, you see it says, there's a period, it says V'nikra. You see that? Then you go down 1, 2, 3 lines, and you'll see at the end of the line, it says the word mamish with a period. You see that? Yisrael, you got it?
In the right column.
Let's find the place. Here, grab a book.
Oh, the holy. Yeah, here it is.
Okay, so here we go. So he says, V'hainu levisha b'shorsha l'mayla mayla shorish nefesh b'hamish gavoa yoser b'chinas nefesh elokis. So we see that the source of the animal soul is actually higher than the source of the godly soul. And then he brings a proof text for this, right? Where do we know this from? It's kind of a random Kabbalistic code over here. He says, "K'moshe kasu ve'ela hamalachim asher malchu lifnei malach melech l'bnei Yisrael." So what's this referring to? Later on in Sefer Bereshis, it speaks about what's called the Elufei Edom, the chieftains of Edom. You like that translation, I see. The chieftains of Edom, right? So when it goes through all the lineage after Yaakov and Esav are born, and then after there's a little bit of a discussion of the Toldos of Yaakov, it explains who were all of the chieftains of Edom. And it goes like quickly, succinctly through their lineage, because they actually produced kings on earth before the Jewish people did, right? They sort of like dominated the earth before we got our act together. And that's what it says over there. These are the kings that ruled, that reigned, lifnei malech melech l'bnei Yisrael, before a king reigned amongst the Jewish people. And so it lists there 8 different people, and it says amongst them quickly, in quick succession, v'yimloch v'yamas, v'yimloch v'yamas. He reigned and he died, he reigned and he died, he reigned and he died. It goes quickly through their lineage, which king reigned and died. And the idea is that those 8 names are basically 8 spheros. The first one being sort of Bina, which is above and a little bit on a different level. And the next are the 7 spheros, referring to the spheros association with Esav, which is the spheros of the world of Tohu. So this pasuk, says the Kabbalists, is a pasuk which is don't forget to ask questions. We're going to throw some lingo around here, but you're probably not the only one.
Duolingo.
So these kings represent the spheros of the world of Tohu. Where is the world of Tohu? It's the world which really preceded the world of Atzilus. And that's what it means, that these kings reigned before a king in Yaakov, and Yisrael reigned, because the king, so to speak, of Yisrael represent this. Yaakov represents the spheros of Atzilus. Yaakov in general, his name is Yud Akev, right? You take his name, break it down, Yud and Heel. So the Yud represents the Chochmah, the Heel represents Malchus, and Yaakov basically himself represents the world of Atzilus. The world of Atzilus is also called the world of Tikkun. It's like a fixed world, because as we're going to soon see, there was a brokenness and a flaw of some designed sort in the world of Tohu. And what followed that is the world of Tikkun, which fixed that problem. That's the world of Kedush, that's the world of Yaakov.
There's
the world of Tikkun? The world of Achdus. No, the world of Tikkun is one. So the idea is that just like when a Jewish person, for the first 13 years of your life, you don't have a Nefesh Elokis revealed yet.
Wait a second,
right?
Can't you if you're...
You have only the Nefesh Bahamas is basically what's running you, right? Because your Nefesh Elokis sort of enters your body at 13. So too in creation, right? The Torah didn't come into the world until 26 generations in, right? And so too you have this idea that the klippa of the fruit precedes the fruit. And so that's what it means, that these kings reigned before a king reigned amongst the Jewish people. That the klippas ultimately, Esav is sort of the foundation of all Klippa. He had a presence in the world. His kingship reigned on the world before the Jewish people reigned. And this also refers to the concept of their source being higher than ours. Their source being from the world of Tohu, our source being from the next world of Tikkun. Right? Okay, so all that is kind of packed into this line. These are the kings that reigned before a king reigned amongst the Jewish people. Shubachinish nefesh elukis. Right? The kings of the Jewish people is called the godly soul. Rak, it's just what happened. It's just that even though the world of Tohu preceded the world of Tikkun, the world of Tohu had, as we're going to see, it had sort of like a perpetual flaw, and therefore we're going to explain in a minute, but the vessels shattered in that world. And when the vessels shattered, they fell. There's this kind of idea of like the vessels falling and going into a state of shards and disconnectedness. And that's what it means when it says these kings reigned, vayimloch vayamas, that these kings reigned, but they died. Dying is like a metaphor for the shattering of the vessels, that they couldn't handle the task that was laid out for them. Nonetheless, aval b'shorsham hem lamayla mayla mechinas nefesh elokis. Nonetheless, even though they broke, it was too high of a world for it to sort of work, as hopefully we'll soon explain. Nonetheless, we see that their source, they started in a place which was higher than the world of Tikkun. So what's the story over here? I'd like to give a little bit of a background on this to fill in the blanks. So does anyone know? I'm sure some of you know very well, but what's the story of the shattering of the sparks? How can we explain this idea that the sparks shattered?
I want to hear this.
That the sparks wanted they didn't want to share, like I guess like a certain amount of light, and then once like Chesed didn't want to share with Gevur, and Gevur didn't want to share with Chesed.
Right. So
they just exploded with too much light.
Okay, good. So what's the definition of a world, if you think about it? What is a world? How do we define a world? There's many worlds. There's 4 worlds, whatever. Like, what is a world? How is a world defined? Because there's things that are beyond the world, right? There's the Or Ein Sof, which precedes the worlds. And then there's the world. What is the definition of a world?
A whole new world.
Shouldn't be that complicated. Esser Spheros, right? And what is a Spheros comprised of?
Also
lights and vessels. That's what a world is, right? A world is basically Hashem trying to put light in vessels. The idea is that ultimately what Hashem wants is he wants to share his infinite light with a finite world, so that there can be a being who is finite that can experience his infinite light. So this is exactly what he tried to do. He set out to basically share his infinite light with a finite world, to put lights inside of vessels. The definition of light in vessel is exactly what we just said. Vessel is something that by definition holds something and contains it. Light is Hashem's Or Ein Sof, infinite light. So Hashem's tried to make basically the messianic world. He said, I'll put the infinite light into a containment of some sort. The problem was, there was an issue with the plan. First of all, putting infinite inside of finite is always an issue, right? But there is a particular issue in the plan. And so what happened when you put the infinite light into the finite vessels could not contain this light, and they shattered, right? And this is what we basically call the shattering of the sparks, right? And the shattering of the vessels and the falling of the sparks. So what you mentioned, this idea of Chesed couldn't handle Gevur and Gevur couldn't handle Chesed. Let's understand a little bit the background where this whole thing comes from. Before Hashem made even the world of Tohu and put these 10 lights into these 10 vessels, the 10 lights actually existed in light form alone, without yet being contained inside of any container, inside of his infinite light. So there was sort of like
a crystal bowl, like where you have and then you have like light coming in. You ever seen those things? You go, you know what I'm saying? The sound bowls.
I'm going to give it a go, and then we'll see where it goes from there. So we have the 10 levels of light, which by the way is synonymous with Hashem's name. Because what is Hashem's name? Yud Kei Vav Kei. Yud Kei Vav Kei is another way, as we know of saying the 10 spheros, right? Because the Yud is Chochmah, the Hey is Bina, the Vav is the 6 spheros, and the final Hey is Malchus. So the name of Hashem is synonymous with the 10 spheros, which is synonymous basically with the world. So before Hashem sort of like brought his name out of his Or Ein Sof, the name was inside of the Or Ein Sof. It was like, almost imagine if you have like a drop of water inside of the ocean before it comes out. Right? So it's like this finite aspect of Hashem, but it hasn't actually separated from the infinite aspect of Hashem yet. You with me? Why is everyone looking at me funny?
It's a little bit. Does everybody hop this? Did everybody get this?
Rob,
Yeah.
I remember you said you said that the Yetzirah as a spiritual source to the Nefesh Elokis. Does this have to do with this?
Yeah, it's exactly what we're trying to set off to explain.
So
All right, well, we're doing it, right? I'm trying, because what does it mean that the Nefesh HaBahamas is a higher source than the Nefesh Elokis? It means the Nefesh HaBahamas comes from Tohu, the Nefesh Elokis comes from Tikkun. What is Tohu and what is Tikkun? Tikkun is the world of Atzilus, right? And Tohu is a world which precedes that. The problem with the world that preceded is that it broke, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to explain why it broke, right? So back to the conversation here, you have the 10 aspects of finite light, right? Which is Hashem's name, synonymous with the 10 spheros. And before it becomes something independent from Hashem, it's like a person could have a name and the name was never uttered. You still have a name, but it's inside and it has never come out. So at that level, the name and the Or Ein Sof are really residing at the same frequency, which means the name, the drop of water, which theoretically could be distinct and finite and like categorically different than the rest of the ocean. At this point, before it comes out, it's in the same category of the ocean. It's indistinguishable from the ocean. And therefore, every single thing about the name is Ein Sof. The thing is, the name still has 10 spheros. But it comes out that each one of those spheros, when it's inside the ocean, is Mamash Ein Sof. Right? Because it hasn't yet been delineated and separate and made into finite. So the first attempt of Hashem to reveal this name is the drop of water as it comes out of the ocean. You following the metaphor? Yeah? Where am I losing you?
no, yeah, we got.
It's the way that Hashem was trying to express the light. He was trying to take a portion of that light to express it, and it wasn't capable of expressing.
When you say the light, I just want to like fill in, right? At this point, we're saying there's two types of light.
Yeah.
There's infinite light.
Yeah.
And there's finite light, which is called the name, which is also called the 10 spheros of light.
Yeah.
Right? So he wants to basically express the infinite light really cannot be expressed as it is, but he wants to express the finite light.
Yes.
and put it in and make a world out of it. What's a world? Light in vessels.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So he wants to be, and in doing so, that light of Hashem, at least that aspect of the light of Hashem, can be contained, understood, known. He wants to make himself known to creation, right? So this is the process of how Hashem goes about doing that. It's a little tricky because it starts off that the 10 spheros of light are inside of the infinite light. And that's what I was saying, that like the drop of water is inside the ocean. You getting this?
Yeah, I understand.
So when he now wants to do it, right, he wants to bring the drop out of the ocean, there's a little bit of a problem. Because the drop only knows what it means to be an ocean. No one told it that it's like a finite piece of light. So when the drop was inside the ocean, Chesed was infinite, just like the Ein Sof was infinite. Gevurah was infinite, just like the Ein Sof is infinite, because the quality of the name in its origin was equal to the quality of the Or Ein Sof, because it was a drop of water in the ocean, indistinguishable from the ocean. Mm-hmm. So even though it had the potential to sort of be Yud K Vav K and be 10 spheros and be finite, in its origin, it was synonymous with infinity. Mm-hmm. So therefore, when he brings the name out for the first time, every sphera only knows what it's like to be infinite. And this is why, mind you, why it's like adolescence. It's like before your bar mitzvah. Because you don't know how to like calm down you don't know yet how to have your mind control your heart. Right? Something comes up and it just like takes you over and you're inconsolable. Because every sphere you have is like you could kill your brother, right? It's like Cain like killed Hevel. There's like a state of tohu is like an unrestrained level of emotion, and in its source, it's truly unrestrained. In other words, infinite chesed, infinite gevura. It's before the tikkun, which is the world of Atzilus. What did the world of Atzilus do? It mellowed out the spheros and reminded them that they're finite, and therefore they could be governed by intellect. They could basically be harnessed and controlled. When they first came out, they didn't understand what it meant to be harnessed and controlled, because their only experience they ever had was that they were synonymous with the Or Ein Sof. So when he tried to put those lights into vessels, Chesed wanted to go infinitely Chesed, that the whole world should be Chesed, nothing but Chesed. The Gevurah says the whole world should be Gevurah. So what does that mean? It means infinite light and infinite darkness at the same time. That's like trying to fill up a cup with water to the very brim, and then fill up the same cup with wine to the very brim. It's fine, you can do that, except the cup's going to smash into millions of pieces. And that's what means the Shviras HaKelim. That's where the vessels broke. Those vessels then, so to speak, descended. Right? What it means that they descended is another conversation which we can get into, but in a second. But the point is, Hashem then realized that he had a problem with this plan. His first attempt to create the world failed. And this is what it says, that Hashem created worlds and destroyed them. Some people take this literally to mean that on our earth there was worlds that preceded ours, and there's like theories that are incorrect about the age of the world being much older than 5,783 years, because they take this piece of Kabbalah out of context and they say, see, there was many creations, but that's not what it means. It was a spiritual thing that took place. Hashem tried to create a spiritual world and it shattered. He then tried again and he made a tikkun for his tohu. Right? The first world was called Tohu, which means confusion, because it was infinite in different directions. And what did he do? He had to basically diminish all the lights, so they would not have this experience that Chesed goes on forever and Gevurah goes on forever. And what did he do? He made Chesed understand that it has an end. He made Gevurah understand that it has an end. Now they can share. Chesed, you take the day. Gevurah, you take the night. And instead of having day and night simultaneously all the time, which like ruins, our notion of time and space and reality, each one takes its place and shares, right? And this is why, essentially, the kingdom of Israel is really like 12 strong nations, but each one taking a little piece of land in a small, like country the size of Rhode Island, and all somehow getting along, because everyone knows their place. That's the quality of the Jewish people, is that, which is Torah gives us this quality. It says, no, you can't eat this, can't say that, can't open a store there, can't say that to your friend, right? This is how you do it. You go in like nice shapes and sizes, and then everybody fits together. The men do this, the women do this, the Kohen does this, the Levi does this, Yisrael does this, the carbon can be pure, not impure. The whole laws of the Torah is basically tikkun. It's telling you how to minimize your infinite expansion. It's also tikkun amidos. The Torah teaches you how to be a good person, so you don't have hasagas gavul. You don't overtake the boundary of your friend in terms of his money, his honor, his whatever it is. It's like the Torah is basically a book which teaches you how to contain yourself. It's a very handy thing, because now Hashem's plan of making a world will work, because he can have the 10 spheros. They can all work together to be the name of Hashem, which can then basically, through this 10 spheros, you can see the majesty of Hashem and his oneness. When you have each one of them, spheros, or the letters of Hashem's name, unable to connect with its partner, what you have there is essentially, now we're going to explain what it means, the shattering of the kelim. You have a word that each letter decides to run off on its own and not join with the other letters.
You need harmony.
So, for example, you have usually the word they choose is Baruch for some reason. And so you have if you have all 4 letters of Beis, Reish, Vav, and Chaf all together, you have something bigger than all the individual letters. You have the concept of Baruch. Baruch Sha'amar B'Hai Olam. You can see that that these 4 letters are containing the majesty of God. Because in those letters lives a word, and in that word lives a concept, and it's like you can make out from the individual parts which are working in harmony. You can make out sort of the sum which is greater than the parts, right? But when those letters of Baruch, you take like these refrigerator magnets, and you stick one over here and one over there, one over here, one over there. You have all the components, but they're not in harmony, and therefore that which could theoretically live in them, i.e. the word, the concept, the higher order of divinity, it can't dwell in a place where the letters are not combined. And that's what it means, this separation, this breaking of the sparks. The shattering of the vessel means the individual components no longer could not work together to hold that which is bigger than all of them. And therefore the project that the world would reveal God failed. Because the world can only reveal God if the individual parts are in harmony and therefore can hold the divine reality. And that's what it means they shattered, which means like they basically kept getting further and further and further away. We use the analogy of the one river, right? Nar yotzi me'eden lashkosa sagan, umisham yipared l'daled roshim, right? It says that there is a river that came out of Eden and it watered the garden, right? That is a metaphor for the world of Atzilus. The river is Bina, it coming out of Eden, which is Chochmah, and it's watering the garden, which is Malchus, and it's one river, because that represents a world of Tikkun, right? So all the components are working together to show you oneness. But it says from there they separated, which means out of the Garden of Eden, 4 rivers came out, which means now the letter Beis, Reish, Vav, and Chaf, they're starting to like not work nicely together. And that's what happens in the Bria, right? It was one river because the spheros were fixed and they started to work together and show the unity of God. From Atzilus and out, the letters start to separate and you wind up having a feeling of disconnected. Like the world does not show you how it's one. Everyone's fighting with each other.
Internet.
And you have sort of something called like the Elufei Edom. You have the chieftains of Edom. That they were all these kings, but they didn't like work together as one nation. As soon as one rose, he took his fellow down. It's like the story of like all the Roman Empire. Everyone's trying to like kill the king to take control. They don't have like a unified empire, right? And this is the world of Bria. That you already lose the cohesiveness of the word, and as it goes into Yetzirah, it separates more, and then more and more and more. So where did this all start? Right? We jumped to Atzilus, right? Above Atzilus is where the original shattering happened. In Atzilus, Hashem was able to rein the Spheros in for a second, and made them all, the 4 letters of Hashem's name or Baruch spell a word, but it didn't fix it entirely. It fixed it in the realm of Atzilus, in some kind of a spiritual dimension. But the idea that the sparks fell means that Atzilus is only able to contain this problem, this containment of the issue only took place in a higher spiritual dimension. And below that higher spiritual dimension, the shattering continued and continued and continued and made this crazy world. How did Atzilus actually wind up becoming fixed? Actually, it was the work of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, right? That's why they represent the work that they did on this world of unifying Hashem. They were the ones that sort of helped Hashem to reconfigure the world of Atzilus. That's why Avram represents Chesed of Atzilus, Yitzchak is Gevurah of Atzilus, Yaakov is Tiferes of Atzilus, because the work they did in this world, they weren't able to fix the shattering in this world. But through their work in this world, they were able to fix the shattering that took place in Tohu, and they basically created the world of Tikkun, which is why eventually their children, Moshe Rabbeinu, would be able to go and grab a piece of Tikkun called the Torah and bring it to this world. So we would now perpetually and eternally have the skills of a Tikkun type world to start to apply it to our world. Everyone understands? Questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
So like,
You following this, man? Okay, great.
So what you're saying is, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov gave us the ability, because through them, they were able to, like you said, realign.
Yeah.
The fractured parts of Atzilus,
Right.
that had previously been broken from the previous world.
That's right.
Which is why when this world was created from Adam until Noah,
till Abraham.
No, but till Noah first, there was no such thing as teshuva. Like teshuva didn't exist. It was because of the tohu and all this.
Because Chesed would never understand Gevurah. You couldn't like change your mind.
Okay,
right,
and
exactly.
And so through different people coming through and doing what they had to do until it got to Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov.
Avram was the first one. Avram it says there's 2,000 years of Tohu, 2,000 years of Tikkun, 2,000 years of Yemos Mashiach. This is how the Zohar breaks down the world. The 2,000 years of Tikkun started with Abraham. Yeah. He began a new era for 2,000 years.
And so through them, they didn't pave the way, but they set it up.
They certainly paved the way.
But
why do you say they didn't pave the way?
Because they didn't do the work. We have to do the work. We did the work through the galus and through having the temples when we had the temples, and then going through Mitzrayim, and then going through.
But paving the way literally means they enabled us to do the work.
Okay, well,
I would
guess
say
they
they
paved the way.
specifically paved the way. That's
Okay,
what they
well,
did. They didn't do it because they weren't here, but they paved the way.
They paved the way. They set it up. They
Yes.
set it up so that we would have the opportunity.
Exactly. If it wasn't for them, there would be no world of Tikkun. There would be no Torah, and we would be powerless to do what they did in their time for a lower dimension, which was our task.
Okay.
Right?
Rabbi, two questions. One question is kind of connected to that. It's almost as if, like, when Hashem made the world of Tohu with the shattering of the Sephirot,
Yeah.
it's almost as if like Hashem wanted it to go down like that. Like, because there wasn't any seichel that they could have said that.
There was
we're gonna
no
share
one
it.
around to sin.
Right.
So it was 100% Hashem
A
did
bit,
that.
we could say the same thing then going all the way towards Abraham, right? Like Adam, like it was almost meant to go down
Yes,
like
yes,
that.
yes, 100%.
And one more question is with the shattering of the vessels, there was never like a Teferet, there wasn't like a Yitzhak, there wasn't a Malchut, there was only Gevurah and Chesed.
Right.
What world are you in, Rabbi?
There was no, the idea of tikkun is when the spheres are aligned in this way of a segol. You know, a segol is like a vowel where it has a dot here, a dot here, and a dot underneath. That's how the spheres you see are aligned. Chesed Gevurah Tiferes, right? Chochmah Bina Das, Chesed Gevurah Tiferes, Netzachot Yisod, and we are called Am Segula for this reason. Which means like kind of like a beloved nation or a treasured nation, but it really means we're the nation of the segol. Because we are the world of tikkun. Before us, everything was in a state of duality, as you said. There was no central line which could fuse together and harmonize the two poles, right? And that's why there was no tshuva. That's
Like a
why
guitar.
there was only destruction, right? So, okay, so this is basically the idea. Yeah.
No, it's kind of on point, but it's not so on point.
Yeah.
What's the difference between the light of Chesed and the Keli of Chesed?
The light of Chesed and the Kli the Kli of Chesed is basically the most external part of the light that essentially congeals. It's like, imagine like ice, right? It's actually a perfect analogy because water is like Chesed. So like when you get to like ice just begins to freeze, the water itself sort of begins to like hold itself. It's like the vessel itself is made out of the same material of the light, but it's a lower version. It's the most external part, which actually sort of solidifies, right? That's the difference between them. So again, in the vessels of Atzilus, you only had the vessels themselves were also problematic. It wasn't just the lights that were infinite, because those vessels which are born out of those lights, they also did not know how to carry more than one sphere at a time. Right? That's really the chiddush of Tikkun, is that the vessels became broad enough to bear opposites, right? So that's why you find by Abraham, his final great test was the Akedah, and what was it? It was Atay Yudati ki yirei Elokim ata. Now I know that you fear God. Fear God? I thought Avram was the lover of God, right? That's Avram's thing. He's chesed, he loves God. Because all of his tests were, are you fixed? Is in your like abundant love, does it also have fear inside of it? And so the ultimate opposition of Avram's nature is to kill his own child for God, right? In other words, like to do something which is the opposite of chesed, 100%, the most extreme example. Do you contain such an intermingling of the midos that you have that inside of you too? When he did that, he became Avram Avinu for all eternity, because he had the ability to go completely beyond his nature and therefore fuse two opposites together. So he was like the perfected midah of chesed, which now had the ability to have its opposite inside, right? All right, let's go inside the mimer now. That was like a little wacky whack.
Rob, when you said that he did that, does that mean that the vessel of Gevurah, is it the light of Chesed is vested in Gevurah or opposite good?
No, it's the vessel of chesed now was sophisticated enough to hold the light of Gevurah as well.
The vessel of Chesed.
Yeah. Okay, so going inside. Ready, guys? We're all together. That was a little preview of to come. So, can I get everyone on the same page? We can look inside together. The line starts with the word chule. aval. You see that?
Yeah.
It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 lines up from the bottom of this first paragraph.
Yeah.
Okay, and it says aval b'shorsha hem l'mayla mayla m'chinas nefesh elokis. But the truth is, the source of the spheres of tohu are much higher than the godly soul. And again, just one more point. Now you understand why. Because tohu, even though it's shattered, the reality is there's infinite light inside of tohu. Tikkun, which is such a nice little world that works so nicely, how did it get so nice? Because Hashem had to massively reduce the intensity of those spheros in order for them to get along and work together. You follow what I'm saying there? Or you're getting distracted by this hugging going on?
He's a holy yid.
I know, but we're trying to stay focused, my friend. Let's stay in the world of tikkun. Tohu is for later. Right? So the idea again, once again, why are we now saying that the animal soul is higher than the godly soul? It should be clear. Because even though the animal soul is running around like an animal, it doesn't know how to like play well with the other animals. It's broken in a sense, but it's stronger. Animals are, in fact, for that reason, stronger than man. Right? And they're actually called chayus, right? They're called like life force, like because inside of them is a much stronger life force. It's just what? It broke out of a sense of unity and fell into fracturedness, but its source is higher than tikkun because it's so infinitely powerful that Hashem was trying to put infinity inside of the spheros. When you got to tikkun, you realize that might not work out so well, so he limited the degree of power. So tikkun is nice, but it's not nearly as powerful as tohu. Therefore, the animal soul actually comes from a higher source than the godly soul, and that's what we're saying, that from your animal soul, from this Mayim Rabim, from these like destructive waters of this world, really you can get higher, not just because they're a catalyst for your godly soul, but because if you can unlock their true nature, the animal soul itself is stronger and higher and more godly than the godly soul. Yeah.
Is it fair to say like the Nefesh Habahamis is more akin to like chaos and power?
Yeah.
And the Nefesh Elokis is more akin to like focus, control, and like connection.
Yeah. But chaos and power, if it was, let's say, harnessed, it would be much more awesome than focus, control. You know what I'm saying? Like it's simple as that. Like the nations of the world and the world itself is so much bigger than the Jews, right? There's a reason for that. All this like infinite numbers of species and goyim and their power and their money, it's not a bad thing. It's a demonstration of Hashem's infinity, and it doesn't stop at this world, this solar system, and like it's all this like stuff. And then there's just these little tiny Jews, handful of us, right? Because we represent like when Hashem contracted himself like infinitely so that godliness could be seen. So you either have the godliness can be seen, but it's a miniature godliness, or you can have godliness can't be seen, but it's the full-blown power of God. So the animal soul has more godliness than and therefore, in a sense, the goyim and the world has a greater presentation of godliness. It's just that it's hidden, and it actually conceals godliness. And here comes the Jews, little running around eating everything, because that's our job, is to basically internalize the external world and make it reveal itself as godliness. That's literally why we're all about eating all the time, right? We're not just eating food; we also eat money, right? And we eat stuff. Like our job is to basically like launder the world into a Jewish bank, right? Because essentially it becomes holy because we use the money for Shabbos and Chagim and the Beis Hamikdash. In other words, we filter the radical, crazy godliness into a streamlined understanding where the letters all spelled Baruch, right? So you can see that this world is created by God. Because what good is it if it's all godliness like leaking out everywhere and it's just causing chaos? So this is our unique job in the world.
Is that why like
They don't like us for that.
Is that why the Goyim like are so convinced that like the world came from the Big Bang and everything's just chaos theory and all that
chaos
stuff?
theory. They got it right. All right, let's go inside. We're outside. We got to get into the world of Tikkun. So right where I said, Lazos at the end of that line, Gam kamosha naf lamata. Even after these sparks fall below, Yeshlem takvuros shel nefesh elukis, al nefesh elukis. They have a certain power over the godly soul, which is also explains, by the way, why your animal soul gets the best of you all the time. Because it's stronger than you, and it preceded you in your own body for 13 years. It like owns you, basically. It's stronger. It's like a beast. Put a beast up against a man, it's not a fair fight, right? That's why even in its fallen, broken state, you can still see that it has all the trimmings of the powerful world of Tohu. And that's because its source comes from this level of Malucha, like we said, the 7 kings that died. They're called, like, these are the Malachim Shemalchu. They're called kings, meaning to say they're raised up and kingly. These spheres of Tohu, they're all called kings, right? It's a problem they're all called kings, because if you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 7 kings all fighting over the same thing, it's chaos, but they're called kings because of their intense power. And by the way, this is what I was saying, we eat everything, it spells itself out right here in the physical world. We are a little obvious microcosm of this whole metaphysical idea, because we, the man, we receive our life force from the animals and from the food. The animals and the food of this world are the tohu droppings everywhere around us. And we can't live without them, because literally we receive our life force, just like the world of Tikkun receives its life force from like the leftovers of the world of Tohu. We, man, who is like a little miniature Tikkun, a little Yudke Vavke running around, we cannot live without the energy that's deposited into us from the world of Tohu, which surrounds us everywhere, which is the animals and the food. Without them, we cannot live. Which is not so of them. They don't need us to live. Tohu is perfectly happy without being condensed and confined into a realm of tikkun. So the animals don't need us. The plants don't need us. They're just happy being in their little separate world of tohu power. We're the ones who rely on them, because we are tikkun that basically filters them into a contained world.
Just had a negative voice coming out.
And why is this? Because in their true source, they're way higher than the souls of Tikkun. And therefore, when the godly soul descends and gets enclosed into the animal soul, when all of a sudden this seems like a punishment before, because now you're like imprisoned inside of this behemoth, but now we see that going down into this behemoth is the best way to eat it. You don't need to eat only the animals and the plants and the money outside of you. You can eat your own animal, right? You have your very own little beast of tohu that you were implanted inside of, and your godly soul is in there, and it can eat it all day long. It can use its energy, it can use its eyesight, it can use its mind, it can use its, right? And everything that it has, you are constantly trying to filter into your godly soul's perception, and therefore your godly soul is much more strong than it would be if it didn't have this animal soul, because when it eats, it gains the energy, the tohu energy, from where the animal soul gets its energy from. And this is why when you go down and get involved in business and all kinds of thoughts of parnasa, binyanim, gashmim, and just stam physicality, Shem nikroim Mayim Rabim, that's all the Mayim Rabim in your life. Nonetheless, that specifically is why your soul gains the ability of loving God b'chol miyodecha. Right? It's not just because you're resisting this evil force and finding a light inside of your soul which you didn't know was there before. Remember, that was like stage 1, like hiskafia. It's also because the animal soul itself has awesome powers. And when you harness those powers, it's that which gives you the b'chol miyodecha. An animal has b'chol miyodecha. An animal's like, you ever see like these like Africa videos of just like a lion on the prowl? When's the last time you acted like that? Just like racing across the world to just like pounce on your enemy and like tear its neck off. It's crazy, right? People don't do that, thankfully, right? But animals are crazy. They have a b'chol miyodecha like built into their system. They're just like crazy, wild. They don't have a mind containing their heart. And so you got one of those actually. Right? So the idea that you like gain from the Mayim Rabim, again, this is now we're going deep into the Mayim, right? We said there's 2 ways that the Mayim Rabim assist you One is because of the resistance against it. You find something inside your godly soul which is deeper and stronger. But now we're saying that it's not just that, it's because you're actually tasting from the Bechol Miyodecha, which is the property of the animal itself. He's the one who has the Bechol Miyodecha. So when you're riding on an animal, you're riding faster, not because your man has found some deeper essence of itself. It's because the animal that it's riding on takes it much further than it could ever go. So it's actually the Mayim Rabim themselves which are holy, as long as they're properly contained, as long as you're riding them in an ark. And this is Bli Gevul. It actually is. It's a like we said before about the spheres of Toh, that they literally go on forever. They don't know how to not be infinite because they came out of infinity. So too, like a remnant of that remains inside of them in this world, and it's like this infinite power that can be unleashed. And when you taste from that animal part of yourself, it's a higher level than your soul was even before it descended into the body. Even though you were like sitting in like the peak of the Seder Ishtalshalus, you were at best, you were in Atzilus, right? And now you're tasting something which comes from Tohu, which precedes Atzilus. And because before you came into the body, you were merely benefiting from the rays of the Shekhinah, and like some kind of a ray of Atzilus. And so we see from here that in two ways these Mayim Rabim really give you something you wouldn't have had before, both in a way of Iskafia and Ishapcha. Iskafia, as we said, is that you have to force away the chaos of the outer world, and that takes a strength which you wouldn't normally have. And these hapcha is that you realize that on the contrary, the animal world is like you're a lion that you're going to ride through your new divine service, and that's a transformation of the animal. And through these ways, it's specifically the darkness, which is the idea of the Yisruna or mitoch hachoshech. And that's what we said before, that there's two ways of understanding the words. There's an advantage of light from darkness. One is, light is more advantageous when it's fighting against the darkness. Two is, there's an advantage of light when darkness itself is seen to be light. When we clarify that this is not something opposing God, on the contrary, this mighty waters is a level of divinity which is actually infinite. And now that I've sort of brought that into my perception, I can also taste from that infinite level of God. That's called a transformation. And why is that? Because their source is higher than the godly soul. It's just they fell in this through the Hishtalshlus, and they became separate until it became like a treif lion, and that's what it means vayimloch vayamas. That these chieftains of Edom, which is the spheres of Tohu, in their source, they reigned, they were kings. But then they died because the kings were all fighting with each other, and they fell. The letters separated. They became finite entities, and they became the gross physical world. But through Iskafia, this is the idea. We bring. They fell and they died. Yeah. Death is a metaphor for separation and losing connection with your source. Just like when a person dies, they lose connection with their source. So by having Iskafia and Ishapcha, utilizing the animal soul for what it was intended for, we create something called Tchis HaMesim. We bring the dead back to life, which means we show that these dead things are actually alive. On the contrary, they have more life than we do because they came from a higher source. Everyone follows along?
So you connect it by, like, you're connecting these dead things that are called like the spheros that fell from Tohu, and because they've been in Tohu, since you're using them in like Tikkun, they're connected back to like Shem?
Yeah, in fact, it's even higher. Now, you might want to say, hold on, did you just say the Goyim are higher than the Jews? Right? Because we kind of slipped that in there. And the truth is that yes and no. According to what he's saying here, yes. But in another place, he explains that even though Esav was born first, actually Yaakov was conceived first, right? So actually Yaakov did come first. It's just that when he was, it's like, the Rashi gives kind of like a blunt metaphor. If you put two rocks into a tube, which is closed on one side, the rock that went in first comes out last. So Yaakov was conceived before Esav, but he was therefore born after Esav. And the idea is that even though in a revealed sense, Esav came first, which means you're 13 years old with an animal before you have your godly soul, and the world and Tohu is higher than Tikkun. In the source of all sources, actually Tikkun is higher than Tohu. It's just that it's not in a revealed way.
Yeah.
It's ultimately when you have Tohu together with Tikkun. That's when you have something which is higher than both of them. And that's what it means that Yaakov comes first. It means like the limited nature of God, that the fact that infinite can go into finite and like play nicely with others is a crazy miracle. It's one thing if you want to say that I'm infinite and therefore you have to tame me in order to be finite. It's one thing to say if you have finite, you can see God, but you lose the luster of infinity. To say that I can have infinity and it's containable, that's like above, that's when you have a combination of Tohu and Tikkun together. And therefore, that's what it means Yaakov really comes first. Because Esav, the idea is that the finite part of Hashem is actually higher if the finite is containing the infinite. And that's exactly what you get out of this world. You come into this world and you tame your animal, or you ride your wild animal, even better. This is the idea that you now have infinity, but being driven by little Yankel, right? Who's only eating kosher, and only, like, in other words, he's taking the power of the infinite world, but he's contained it inside of a fine. And this is what the Rebbe always says, like the poster child for Mashiach is when you have the lights of Tohu in the vessels of Tikkun, right? That's the definition of Mashiach. So you have both. We're going to hold here.
Sorry, one more question.
Yeah, you can keep asking questions. Just gonna stop the